On Friday night of this last week, there was some severe weather that passed through the Commonwealth of Kentucky that left some devastating damage. As of right now, there have been 18 confirmed deaths, and that number is expected to rise. Our thoughts go out to those families. A side effect, however, once that weather did pass through, it left us with some clear skies. This is for the first time in approximately 3 weeks. So I was able to get the new Heliostar out, get everything set up, and take some solar images. There was some activity today. In this video, I'm going to show you my setup, how I've got everything configured. I'm going to go through the processing of the images. I did not, however, do any screen captures of my actual image capture process. I use SharpCap, and I just failed to make those recordings. However, we're going to go through the process of stacking each of the videos that I captured, take those, run them through Pixinsight to process each of the images into a nice photo. We'll use ImPPG to align them. And since I'm using the SolarQuest mount, it works wonderfully as a solar tracker. However, because it is an Alt-as mount, you get some field rotation. I have a technique here that I will show you using DaVinci Resolve that allows us to derotate those images into a final video. So stay tuned, and here we go. Here's the equipment I'm using. I'm using a ZWO 174mm monochrome camera, a Melee N95 mini PC, the SolarQuest mount, solar tracking mount. On the telescope, I also have a ZWO EAF that allows me to get some fine focusing. And then the star of the show is the Skywatcher Heliostar 76 H-alpha telescope. I'm not going to go in depth on using Autostakkert. Most people are familiar with that. Here are some of the settings, however. Since I use it is a full solar disk, I use planetary alignment, and then depending on the data I have, I stack the best 30, 40, 50% of the data, just depending on what that gives me. Once I have all of the images stacked, I'm using Pixinsight. I'll go down and pull one of the images from the center of the run. In this case, I had 300 images. I use Bill Blanshan's Solar Toolbox and Pixinsight. Not going to go in depth on all of these settings. Bill has a wonderful tutorial on his channel, and I'll link that down below. So basically just doing the various settings, setting the black point of the image here, get a reading, get something close, get that set. Then we'll go in and work on the prominence boost so that we can see the different prominences on the sun for that particular day. And I'll make adjustments there. And once I get all of those adjustments the way I like them, then we will move on to the contrast enhancement. That on, and then we'll play with different variables here. If you hover over, of course, you get the tool tips for each one that give you the suggestions from Bill. You can obviously over process it if you're not careful. Once you find something you like, we can move on to color. He has some built-in settings. This is for HA. It just loads that preset. I found this works pretty well. I rarely make any changes to the colorization of the object. And then we move on to sharpening. Turn on sharpening, and we can take a look at the mask here for the prominences. Make some adjustments to the mask so that we are getting the parts covered that we wish. Tweak that back and forth. Too little, we're not getting all of our prominences. We want to make sure we get everything covered. And once I get something that I like, then I can turn off the mask so that I can actually see what I'm going to be sharpening here. So the mask off, it's doing my processing, and now I can work on the actual sharpening of the image. So if you hover over it, gives you some tool tips here. If you go way too high on the kernel size here, obviously you are going to get a very strange looking image. Don't like that, obviously. You can adjust the levels. And I'll play with the sharpening until I get something that I like. Once I'm happy with the way the image is looking, after my minor tweaks here and there, let it process so I can see what I've got. Each time you make a change, you have to give it a moment to process. The computer I'm using is an AMD 32-core machine with 64 gig of memory, but it still takes a while to process. Once you get the processes, I pull that off onto the desktop. I can close out my image, and then I will open up an image container, drag that over here on the screen. I will add in all of my images that were stacked. You can see here my folder structure that I use. So here's all the images that were stacked. There are 300 of them. Select all of those, open them. I set my output directory, and under process, and I have PI, then I have an align, then video. So they're all going to go into the PI directory. Then I open up a process container, draw my solar image, or my process toolbox into that, then drag the image container over to the process container, and the process will begin. This will take a little bit of time to go through. Once it is complete, here is all of my processed images. I can open one up here and we can take a look at it. So now I'm through with Pixinsight, so we can close that out. And the next part of the process is to use ImPPG to align all of those. And this is the finicky part. Sometimes ImPPG doesn't like things and it crashes. I don't have an answer for why that happens, but basically we're going to go under Tools and Align Images. We're going to load all of the images that we did in Pixinsight, so go all the way down to the PI folder, select all of those, and open. Since this is a whole disk image, well, first here, let's select our output folder, which will be the align folder. And then since this is a whole disk image, I'm not going to crop. I'm going to let it pad everything. And I'm telling it to align on the solar rim, not on the surface, because we're doing a whole disk. And then we tell it to begin. And it's fairly quick, and you'll know fairly quickly whether or not it's going to fail or if we're going to succeed. And this time it succeeds. And most of the time it does, but from time to time it doesn't. So then it writes out all of the aligned images. And again, 300 images Takes a few moments for it to create all of those, but it is fairly quick. And we are complete. We can cancel that and get rid of ImPPG. So if we take a quick look at these, pick one here in the middle, and then if I kind of blink through them, you notice the image is not rotating. It's staying fairly, or it is rotating, but they're all aligned together. So we're very good there. So the process to de-rotate the images is using DaVinci Resolve. I did not come up with this process. It's from Niklas Adelt, and that's probably a butchered name for me, sorry. I have linked a YouTube video to this process below. I'm not a DaVinci Resolve user, but this process works fairly well. So the first thing that we have to do here is there's some project settings that you have to verify. We want to make sure that we're setting the default timeline, the frame rate on the timeline, and I'm using 24 frames per second. So we make sure that that's set properly. And then once that is set, we need to set some preferences here under user. So we're going to go to under DaVinci Resolve and preferences, under user, and then our input, we want to make sure that stills come in at 1 frame per still. So that's important. Once we have that, then we come in and we are going to import our images. So these are the aligned images. We select them and we drag those into our to import those into DaVinci. We have to go to edit first here and then drag those onto your timeline, and it brings them in as a series of single images. You then, once you've done that, we want to highlight or select all of those. So just make sure you've selected everything. Right click and say a new Fusion clip. Then we click on Fusion at the bottom. Make sure you click on the beginning media in 1. Do a shift space bar to open up this menu, and we want to search for planar tracker. And we want to drag that on to our timeline. Once we have picked that, over to the side under pattern, we want to choose tracker as hybrid point area and motion type as translation, rotation, and scale. Make sure you go back to the beginning of the clip, and then we want to go in, we can zoom in if we need to, but we want to highlight an area of high contrast. So we draw a selection around some area on our image of high contrast. So I'm going to pick this area here, and basically you just click around and you have to completely enclose your selection. So you have to go all the way around and make sure that you close the circle. Once you have that done, we go over to the right and we click on this little tab here, this little button here, and as you see as it plays through, the image is rotating and it's tracking all of that. Once it's done that, we change our method to stabilize. Hit the edit button at the bottom. Do any cropping or anything that you might want to do. I'm going to move my image all the way over to the beginning of the timeline. You click on the little rocket at the bottom. This is the export ability of DaVinci, and we're going to give it a name, tell it where to put it. So I will put it in my video folder. Okay. Then we add it to make sure that we've got the settings that we want for our video. Click on Add to Render Queue and then tell it to render all. And it will process through it fairly quickly. And now we have our finished video. And we play the clip, and here we are playing the clip. And as you can see, there is no rotation. So I hope you enjoyed this. I will show you the final product and then also show you a zoomed in area. There was a really nice little flare that came up about halfway through. Hope you enjoyed it. If you learned anything and want to see more of this, please hit like and subscribe. And so far, I'm really enjoying the Heliostar. It's a very, very, very nice piece of equipment. Thank you.